Good afternoon. This is Pamela, and you are listening to Watchman on the Pod. Today, I believe I am going to finally finish the book that I have been reading by Elisabeth Elliot, and it is entitled Let Me Be a Woman. And remember, these were letters that she wrote to her daughter Valerie before she had gotten married. We're in chapter 45. Courage of the Creator. In Isk, Vincent's story, The Deluge of Norderney, she has four people marooned in a barn loft during a flood. There are a cardinal, an old maiden lady, and a young man and woman, all of them strangers to one another. The flood water is rising. They know that this is their last night. The young couple are married by the cardinal, and the cardinal and the old lady settle themselves to talk. We will consider the lesson which these lovers above and before all other things teach us about the tremendous courage of the Creator of this world, says the Cardinal. Every human being has, I believe, at times given room to the idea of creating a world himself. The Pope, in a flattering way, encouraged these thoughts in me when I was a young man. I reflected then that I might, had I been given omnipotence and a hand, have made a fine world. I might have bethought me of the trees and rivers, of the different keys and music, of friendship and innocence. But upon my word and honor, I should not have dared to arrange these matters of love and marriage as they are, and my world should have lost sadly thereby. What an overwhelming lesson to all artists! Be not afraid of absurdity. Do not shrink from the fantastic. Within the dilemma, choose the most unheard of, the most dangerous solution. Be brave, be brave. Ah, madam, we have got much to learn. And the cardinal fell into a deep thought. Who of us, given the chance to arrange the world to our liking, would have had the powers of imagination that the cardinal allowed himself, let alone those that God had? Who of us would ever have had the courage of the Creator when he conceived the idea of sex? We cannot suppose that he overlooked the potentials, the pitfalls, the high risk that would accompany it. He saw them all, and he made a woman suitable, fit in every way for man. Every good endowment that we possess and every complete gift that we have received must come from above, from the Father of all lights, with whom there is nothing slightest variation or shadow, there is never the slightest variation or shadow of inconsistency. I think it would be correct to include sexuality as one of the good endowments that we possess. It is one of the terms of our life, one of the givens that we had no choice about and that we are not at liberty to alter. There is an underlying principle of sexuality. The relationship between man and wife, as we have already seen, symbolizes the relationship between Christ and the church. In the family of God, however, some have seen sexuality as a distinction to be carefully obliterated. Paul's declaration in Galatians has been cited as proof that there is no difference between the respective positions of men and women. For in Christ you are all sons of God through faith. For as many of you as were baptized into Christ have put on Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is neither male nor female. For you are all one in Christ Jesus. But the man who wrote those words is the same man who took care to distinguish between the roles of women and men, exhorting women to be modest in dress, silence in church, use of a head covering, and submission to their husbands. He also was generous in his praise of the women who had assisted him in his apostolic ministry. He recognized spiritual gifts as having been distributed to men and women alike, set down rules for their proper use. But he strongly maintained the sexual distinction. Is that what is important? Paul not only never denied sexual differences, he emphasized them. This passage in Galatians refers to what happened to a Christian through baptism. He becomes, whether male or female, slave or bond, Jew or Greek, a son. He enjoys the same privileges which all sons of God enjoy. This order of redemption does not unite the two poles, nor displace the order of creation, as is shown by Paul's reference to this order in 1 Timothy. Let a woman learn in silence with all submissiveness. I permit no woman to teach or to have authority over man. She is to be kept silent, for Adam was formed first, then Eve. It is a misguided kind of super spirituality that attempts to erase all distinctions between Christians. It is a form of escapism, an evasion of responsibility, and a serious distortion of truth. Thank the giver of this great gift, Valerie. Don't join those who apologize for it or want to make you forget it. It wasn't your idea to begin with. It was your Creator's, and what a courageous Creator He is. Your obedience to Him will help other women to be women and men to be men. The Inner Sanctum. God did not limit the gift of sexuality to those who He foreknew would marry. The gift of sexual intercourse He ordained exclusively for those who marry. This is unequivocal in Scripture. There are no exceptions. Intercourse without total commitment for life is demonic. This supreme intimacy was mysterious even to Paul, who wrote, "Husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. The two shall become one." This is a great mystery, and I take it to mean Christ and the church. No one who hated women could possibly have written that. No stronger language could have been found in denote the intimacy which exists between Christ and his bride. Unquestionably, it has become of these mysteries that physical union is reserved for a husband and wife, who have given themselves unconditionally to one another before God and the world. But they enter into knowledge which no one else is permitted to enter. It is the inner sanctum of human knowledge, and Abraham knew his wife. I'm not going to tell you where, how, or when to do it. I'm not going to tell you what to wear. I'm leery, as you know, of getting too technical. There was a man in one of my Greek classes when I was in college who, when we would be discussing at great length how some, particle or mood in a New Testament passage would matter. If I get too technical, you're going to miss the blessing. As with New Testament Greek, so with sex. Beware of how to do it book. There is a danger in analysts. You can't learn the meaning of a rose by pulling it to pieces. You can't examine a burning coal by carrying it away from the fire. It dies in the process. There is something deadly about the relentless scientific probe into the mechanics of sexual activity. Lights, cameras, artificial organs and instruments, note-taking observers, and the horrifying detailed reports published for the world's application. To say anything of the volunteers who participate in the collective experiments, willingly exhibiting themselves for the cause of science and reducing this precious gift not merely to banally, but to bodily function, is devoid of meaning for the human being as if it were an animal. It is all perfectly natural, we're reminded, and is therefore supposed to follow that mystery. Silence and privacy are entirely out of place. We've outgrown all that. We're liberated. I very much fear that this liberation is not freedom, but a new and demonic bondage. By throwing away the very things which guarded its meaning, we have thrown away the thing itself. What was once priceless is now the cheapest commodity on the market. George Steiner wrote, "Sexual relations are, or should be, one of the citadels of privacy, the night place where we must be allowed to gather the splintered, harried elements of our consciousness for some kind of involate, order, and response." New pornographers subvert this last vital privacy. They do our imagining for us. They take away the words that were of the night and shout them over the rooftops, making them hollow. Images of our lovemaking, the stammerings we resort to in intimacy, come prepackaged. Our dreams are marketed wholesale. You can buy textbooks, diagrams, and full-color photographs of sexual techniques. We are expected to be a nation of bedroom virtuosos. Yesterday, Joe and I went to Provincetown. We sat at an umbrella-shaded table by the sidewalk and watched the passing parade of dejected, disheveled, timid humanity, shuffling and say, saying and shelping along the sidewalk in search of a good time. Nudity is not supposed to move us. We are asked to behold without shock, without even surprise, the nearly total exposure of every conceivable shape, size of physique. I don't want to look at nudity without emotion. I want it reserved to enhance, not exhibited to destroy, the depth of individual experience. I feel I am being robbed of the incalculably valuable treasure of delicacy, mystery, and sophistication. Modesty was a system of protection. The alarms have all been disconnected. The house is wide open to plunder. The distinction between intimacy and openness is rubbed out altogether. The craze for sensitivity and sharing has done its pernicious work. There is no longer a sense of occasion or appropriateness. What ought to be hidden is displayed. What ought to be whispered or covered in silence is shouted. What ought to be kept back for a chosen time, a chosen place, and a chosen individual is thrown out into the thoroughfare. Sex is not the most important thing that makes marriage work, but it is important. It has no authority of its own. It cannot lead to freedom. It must not control. It cannot finally fulfill. It's love's highest ecstasies. The lover knows that this is not all there is. The closest closeness is not close enough. The I-you that we thought was ultimate brings us ultimately to that other thou. It is the will of God that leads to freedom. It is the will of God that finally fulfills. The world and all its passionate desires will one day disappear. But the man who is following God's will is part of the permanent and cannot die. But sex is a part of the will of God for husbands and wives. It is one way in which they glorify Him. Think of it. They are not to deny it to one another. Love your husband. Love his body. Love to be close. Read the beautiful Song of Solomon, a love poem included in the inspired Word of God. Would we have thought a love poem belonged in the Bible? Which describes the beauties of the lover in the eyes of the beloved, and of the beloved in the eyes of the lover. They saw each other. His head, his hair, his eyes, his cheeks, his lips, his arms, his legs, his appearance, his speech are all sighted with rapture. My beloved is all radiant and ruddy, distinguished among 10,000. This woman had eyes to see, a heart to love, and the ability to put it into words. Perhaps all three of these things, in some women more than in others, be learned. I believe that they can be learned. A wife needs eyes to see the man in all his aspect which God has given her. She needs a heart trained by practice to love him. She needs to be able to express what she sees and how she loves. We are human beings made of flesh and blood as well as of brains and emotions. The Word had to be made flesh before we could truly understand what God was like. A man prefaces his proposal of marriage with a declaration of love. In the beginning was the Word. He says it in as many ways as he can think of: words, gestures, looks, gifts, flowers. But it is not until he marries the woman that the Word finally becomes flesh and his love is expressed most fully. But then the flesh must again become Word. Both the woman and the man need to be told and told again and again and again. They are loved. Behold, thou art fair, my love. There is no spot in thee. Word and flesh and word, and so on through life. The essence of sexual enjoyment for a woman is self-giving. Give yourself wholly, joyfully, hilariously. We ever talked about the hilarity of sex? No one had prepared me for how rollicking can be at times. Neither husband nor wife should withhold this pleasure from the other except by mutual agreement for a limited time. His body belongs now to you and yours to him. Each has power over the others, each holding the others in holiness and honor under God. You will find that it is impossible to draw the line between giving pleasure and receiving pleasure. If you put giving first, receiving is inevitable. There are times when you will find it impossible to give, and your husband, in love to you, does not demand. There are times when you will be ravenously hungry, and he will want nothing so much as to go to bed and go at once to sleep. Your love then will want what he wants more than what you wanted yourself. This is another kind of giving. You will want to bring forth for your lover your own treasures. They are not to be revealed ahead of time to him, nor in retrospects to anyone else. These are your own gifts, unique and exceptional, and not to be delivered over to commonplace. Hold them sacred. As Rabbanadath Tagore wrote, "My moments signed by God, need not be appraised in the marketplace." It will not always be clear-cut and simple. In this manner, as in all others where your life is bound closely to your husband's, you will sometimes be aware that you need help. Remember first that love itself, the educated heart, has a way of teaching you what to do. Worry is worse than useless. It's destructive. Paul wrote, "Don't worry over anything whatever. Tell God every detail of your needs in earnest and thankful prayer, and the peace of God, which transcends human understanding, will keep constant guard over your hearts and minds as they rest in Christ Jesus." It's God who thought up sex. Every detail of your needs includes sexual ones. You can talk to him about them. You can't shock or embarrass him. If any of you does not know how to meet any particular problem, he has only to ask God, who gives generously to all men without making them feel foolish or guilty. Loyalty. A third thing that makes a marriage work, in addition to the acceptance of hierarchical order and the proper use of sex, is loyalty. Loyalty is based on pride, the right sort of pride that recognizes intricate worth in the country or institution or place or person, which is the object of loyalty. We have seen women who are manifestly not loyal to their husbands. I do not mean that they are unfaithful. They are not proud to be their wives. Sometimes this is because they despise them. Sometimes it is old-fashioned jealousy. A friend complained to me that she was tired of being a nobody. She's only Mick's wife. Mick was prominent in certain circles, a highly attractive man, very successful. Plenty of women would have considered it quite enough to go through life as Mick's wife. But Lisa wanted to be Lisa. She was pretty, she was likable, she was thought of as a good match for Mick, and it wasn't enough to suit her. It seems to me that a woman ought to be willing to take this risk. When she takes her husband's name, she consents to be known as his wife. Nothing thrilled me more than to be identified with a particular man. I didn't mind if people thought of me as his wife. I loved it. I never felt that my own personality was submerged. I was proud of his, and knew that a new personality, the personality of marriage itself, is created when two people wed. Pride involves identity. You must identify yourself with someone in order to be proud of him. We are proud of American achievements only because we are Americans. We are proud of the local football team and say, "We won." In the doodles I found on your desk and on the telephone pad, I see your new name, written many times with many flourishes. You can hardly wait to acquire this new identity. You have already begun to think of yourself as his, and you want the world to know it. This loyalty will bring you suffering. You have asked for specifics when I have talked to you about the suffering that love may entail. Here's one of them. If you are proud of your man and loyal to him, you will suffer when he is criticized. No man in a public position escapes criticism, and you must stand by him when it comes. You will know sometimes that the criticism is a just one, and because you are loyal, you will suffer the more. You will be, by your identification with this man, included in the criticism. When he fails, you cannot be proud of his failure, but you can be loyal. You can maintain that faith in the idea that God had when he had made him, and you can comfort and support him, giving him the strength of your love and the incentive which your pride in him will always instill. When all things were made, none was made better than this, to be a lone man's companion, a sad man's cordial, and a chilly man's fire. There is no herb like it under the canopy of heaven. Love is action. The summer solstice has just passed, and the days are long and sunny and clear. It is evening, and hardly a ripple moves on the harbor. The slate blue of the darkening sky is reflected in the slate blue water. The boats lying at anchor are struck full gold with the setting sun, and Morris Island across the harbor is velvet green gold in the late light, standing against the twilight. A white seagull floats quietly on the surface of the dark water near the shore. The honeysuckle makes the air sweet with the gift of its perfume. A small boat comes in from the sea, snipping through the water like a pair of scissors. I have only a few more days in this lovely place. You are in Oxford now, beautiful old Oxford, with its narrow streets, its bells, its green and flowered closes, its libraries and chapels and halls. But I picture you here with me, sitting in the cottage by the fire, talking. On the mantel are a black wooden decoy, a brown pottery jug of winter grasses, and a copper bowl, and a row of books which are my great temptation when I am trying to write. Macduff lies just outside the back door on the cool brick of the patio, his hind paws stretched out behind, bottoms up, like little rubbery flowers, his black shiny nose resting between his two front paws, ears alert. We would talk about the fourth thing, love. It is not fourth in priority. I have not arranged these in order of importance because, quite simply, I don't know how. The ideal marriage, I think, cannot do without any one of them. There must be acceptance of the hierarchical order. There must be sex, there must be loyalty and pride, and there must be, in and through all, love. You have fallen in love. You have had the experience nearly everyone dreams of, that the poets have written about. It happens to some at first sight, to others slowly, and to you, I think, after a very short acquaintance. I remember the first time it happened to me. I realized that it had happened when I looked in the mirror. I saw a different person there. You love him, I said to the face. The face answered yes. You look at his face, and everything in you says yes. You know beyond any doubting that this is the man you could gladly give yourself to. Your heart sings. The whole world sings. The look of things is transformed. But this is not the love of which I want to speak now. The kind of love that makes a marriage work is far more than feelings. Feelings are the least dependable things in the world. To build a marriage on that would be to build a house on sand. When you promise in the wedding ceremony to love, you're not promising how you expect to feel. You are promising a course of action which begins on your wedding day and goes on as long as you both live. Your feelings cannot help but be affected by riches and poverty, health and sickness, and all the circumstances which make up a lifetime. Your feelings will come and go, rise and fall, but you make no vows about them. When you find yourself, like the unstable man in the Epistle of James, driven with wind and tossed, it is a great thing then to know that you have an anchor. You have made a promise before God to love. You promise to love, comfort, honor, and keep this man. You vow to take him as your wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, according to God's holy ordinance, till death parts you. Not one of us can fully face up to all the details of the possibilities at the time we make these staggering promises. We make them in faith, faith that the God who ordained that a man and woman should cleave together for a lifetime is the God who alone can make such faithful cleaving possible. We are not giving grace for imaginations. We are giving grace needed at the time when it is needed. This day, our daily bread. And because you have given your word, you have committed yourself once and for all. This, by the grace of God, I will do. Nothing that has ever been worth doing has been accomplished solely through feelings. It takes action. It takes putting one foot in front of the other, walking the path you have agreed together to walk. The underlying principle of love is self-giving. It seems to me that this is inevitable for a woman who truly loves. You already know how deeply, how urgently you long to give yourself to your husband. It is the essence of femininity to give. Perhaps it is more difficult for a man to give himself. Both husband and wife must learn this. In the wife, this takes the form of submission. Paul never needed to command wives to love. Apparently he thought they would do that without his admonition. He reminded them that their love was to take the form of submission. When, in the course of daily life, the love which they so naturally feel for their husbands is not sufficient for the wear and tear, the action then required is submission. Paul knew that a man's love was of a different sort. His vital drive for domination, God-given and necessary in fulfilling his particular masculine responsibility to rule, renders it more difficult for him to lay down his life. So Paul imposed the heaviest burden on the man when he commanded him to love his wife as Christ loves the church. Your wives must learn to adapt yourselves to your husbands as you submit yourselves to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife in the same way that Christ is the head of the church and Savior of his body. The willing subjection of the church to Christ should be reproduced in the submission of wives to their husbands. But remember, this means that the husband must give his wife the same sort of love that Christ gave to the church when he sacrificed himself for her. Christ gave himself to make her holy, having cleansed her through the baptism of his word. To make her an altogether glorious church in his eyes, she is to be free from spots, wrinkles, or any disfigurement. A church holy and perfect. Men ought to give their wives the love they naturally have for their own bodies. The love a man gives his wife is the extending of his love for himself to enfold her. In practice, what I have said amounts to this. Every one of you who is a husband love his wife as he loves himself, and let the wife reverence her husband. Love means a cross. When you are not yet married, or when your marriage is over and you look back on those years with longing, it is without doubt quite possible to realize it. But there is one thing which enters into all of our life, one thing which will keep us from idealizing life's best, and will make bearable life's worst, and that is the cross. The cross must enter into marriage. Who loveth, suffereth too. The cross enters the moment you recognize a relationship as a gift. The one who gives it may withdraw it at any time. And knowing this, you give thanks to the receiving. Desiring above all else to do the will of God, you offer back to him this greatest of all earthly gifts as an oblation, lifted up in worship and praise, with faith that in the offering it will be transformed for the good of others. This is what the sacrifice means. This is why the cross of Christ towers over the wrecks of time. Love is sacrificial. Sacrifice is a giving, an offering up. The meaning of sacrifice in the Bible is giving of life to another. I believe you may together offer up as a couple your love to God for his transforming work. You may read with special meaning Paul's words to the Romans. With eyes wide open to the mercies of God, I beg you, my brothers, as an act of intelligent worship, give him your bodies as a living sacrifice, consecrated to him and acceptable by him. Don't let the world around you squeeze you into its own mold. Let God remold your minds from within so that you may prove in practice the plan of God is for you is for good, meets all his demands, and moves toward the goal of true maturity. Maturity starts with the willingness to give oneself. Childishness is characterized by self-centeredness. It is only the emotionally and spiritually mature who are able to lay down their lives for others, those who are masters of themselves, that they might be the servants of others. The specific ways in which the great principle of the cross works in daily living are expressed most perfectly in the love chapter of the Bible, 1 Corinthians 13. Here we find proof of the stark and sacrificial rather than emotional character of love. Christian love is action. It is the warp and woof of marriage. Because marriage itself is a life work, this love is worked out through all the days and years of marriage, growing as it is practiced, deepening as cares and responsibilities deepening and turning at the same time. Those cares and responsibilities are even the drudgeries into deeper joy. Paul said that it is not eloquence, it is not the gift of prophecy or knowledge or even knowing the very secrets of God. It is not absolute faith that matters ultimately. It is love. If I know your heart at all, I know that you are not tempted to think of yourself as possessing any of these lofty and enviable gifts, but you do have love. Of that you are perfectly sure. Will it last? It will, if it's the kind of love of which Paul speaks. This love of which I speak is slow to lose patience. It looks for a way of being constructive. A girl wrote to me last year asking advice about her behavior toward her fiancé. She was already wondering how to rebuke him. I gave her this verse. You can't, of course, be constructive if you don't perceive weakness. When you recognize a place where a little construction or reinforcement is needed, you can begin to build up, to encourage, to strengthen. Don't lose patience. Building takes a long time. You have to put up with many delays and inconveniences and a lot of rubble in the process. Love is not possessive. If God has given you to each other to have and to hold, you cannot be possessive. How can you not be possessive? By remembering first that it is a gift, and second, by remembering the limitations of the gift. God has given you to each other in a particular way for a particular time. He is still master of each of you, and it is first of all to him that you answer. There is a possessiveness which is greed, a clutching, clinging lust that overwhelms and overpowers. There is no faith in this kind, no thanksgiving, no reverence for the person made in the image of God. He is treated as an owned object to be disposed of at the will of the owner. There is fear of loss. He might get away or be taken away. Trust the God who gave him to you. Believe him to keep you both. Love is not anxious to impress, nor does it cherish inflated ideas of its own importance. It doesn't need to do either. You have already impressed him. You are enormously important to him. There is no question about that. Accept the fact that and be at rest with him. Be meek, acknowledging that there are areas in his life where he can do without you. Love has good manners and does not pursue selfish advantage. Courtesy has been defined as a lot of petty sacrifices. A husband forsaking his comfortable chair for a moment when his wife walks into the room, jumping out of the car in the rain to open the door for her, or pushing her chair at the dinner table shows by these gestures, which cost him little, not that she is helpless and in need of physical assistance, but that he cares for her. She is pleased to be recognized in these special ways, and he is pleased because she is pleased. It's a small price to pay for a warm feeling. It's another little tug on the cords that bind them together. Love is not touchy. Love is touched. That is, it is deeply sensitive to the feelings of another, sad when he is sad, hurt when he is hurt, glad when he is glad. Love is not touchy. Touchiness refers to the reaction to another's treatment. When two people are living in love, they operate on the assumption that love is at the bottom of whatever treatment they get. This eliminates a lot of potential hurts. It's true that it's always easier to hurt someone you love because everything you do and say matters so intensely to him. Hold on. To react in an injured way is touchiness. Love is not touchy. Love gives the benefit of the doubt, and even if the doubt persists, react in love. Don't pay back evil for evil. Love does not keep account of evil or gloat over the wickedness of other people. On the contrary, it is glad with all good men when truth prevails. Refuse absolutely to compile a list of offenses which you can dump on your husband some day when he complains about something you've done. Love keeps a clean slate. This doesn't mean, of course, that it's possible to forget every offense. To forgive is human, to forget divine. You may have to forgive him when he hurts you, and then forgive him again. And every single time you remember the offense, even if it springs to mind 490 times, you'll find that forgiveness is not nearly so much of a full-time job as resentment. Love knows no limit to its endurance, no end to its trust, no fading of its hope. It can outlast anything. It is, in fact, one thing that still stands when all else has fallen. These are the ground rules. This is how this thing called love really works in a marriage, in the world. In the intimacy of marriage, you offer yourself continually and gladly. When you give yourself to your husband, you are actually giving him life. You are putting meaning into his life, which was not there before, and willy-nilly. This is one of the most astonishing and beautiful of the inescapable facts. You find meaning in your own life because of the sacrifice. Your husband, you loving as Christ loved the church, that is, laying down his life for you, gives you life and puts meaning into his own. An inexplorable spiritual principle is yet set in motion. It is not the laying down that occupies your thoughts, it is the joy. Christ, when he endured the cross, knew the joy that was set before him. You can't talk about the idea of equality and the idea of self-giving in the same breath. You could talk about partnership, but it is the partnership of the dance. If two people agree to dance together, they agree to give and take, one to lead and one to follow. This is what a dance is. And insistence that both lead means there won't be any dance. It is the woman's delighted yielding to the man's lead that gives him freedom. It is the man's willingness to take the lead that gives her freedom. Acceptance of their respective positions frees them both and whirls them into joy. If you can understand your womanhood, Valerie, in this light, you will know fullness of life. Hear the call of God to be a woman. Obey that call. Turn your energies to service. Whether your service is to be a husband and through him, whether your service is to be to a husband and through him the family and home God gives you to serve the world, or whether you should remain in the providence of God, single in order to serve the world without the solace of husband, home, and family, you will know fullness of life, fullness of liberty, and I know whereof I speak, fullness of joy. About the author. Elisabeth Elliot was a lifelong student of Scripture and an articulate writer. Her books, Through Gates of Splendor and Shadow of the Almighty, tell the story of the life of her first husband, Elliot, and his death with 4 other missionaries in Ecuador in 1956. She was a visiting professor at Gordon Conwell Seminary, in addition to writing numerous other books. Praise God. And that is the complete book of Let Me Be a Woman by Elisabeth Elliot. And some things I get pretty choked up. I admit I do. And right now I could cry. Only because I wish someone would have told me these things about marriage. I got married at 17. Very young. I was very young. Had my first child at 20. And then I was divorced when she was 4. When she was 4, I was married 7 years to my first husband. And God says that was my only husband. If I would have known these things then, I don't know what life would have been. But you can't go back to the past. I've got to move forward now. I have been espoused to one husband. I'm not yet married. And that is the Lord Jesus Christ. I want to finish this race. I want to lay my crown at his feet. And I want to be a part of the bride of Christ without spot, wrinkle, or blemish. I want to do all that I can do in order to glorify him and exalt him. I love you all, brothers and sisters, so much. I do. I want you to keep your eyes on Jesus, your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. Embed the Word of God on the tablets of your heart, so you will not sin against God. Have a great day. Bye.